A Taste of Frêdom, page 63. To depend truly on the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we must see the Buddha. What use would it be to take refuge without knowing the Buddha? If we don't yet know the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, our taking refuge in them is just an act of body and speech. The mind still hasn't reached them. Once the mind reaches them, we know the Buddha is like this, the Dhamma is like this, and the Sangha is like this. Then we can really take refuge in them, because these things are born in the mind. Wherever we are, we will have the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha with us. One who is like this doesn't dare to commit evil acts. That is why we say that one who has reached the first stage of enlightenment will no longer be born in the woeful states. His mind is certain. He has entered the stream. There is no doubt for him. If he doesn't reach full enlightenment today, it will certainly be sometime in the future. He may do wrong, but not enough to send him to hell. That is, he doesn't regress to evil bodily and verbal actions. He is incapable of it. So we say that person has entered the noble earth. He cannot return. This is something you should see and know for yourselves in this very life. These days, those of us who still have doubts about the practice hear these things and say, "Oh, how can I do that?" Sometimes we feel happy, sometimes troubled, pleased or displeased. For what reason? Because we don't know the Dhamma. What Dhamma? Just the Dhamma of nature, the reality around us, the body and the mind. The Buddha said, "Don't cling to the 5 khandhas. Let them go. Give them up." Why can't we let them go? Just because we don't see them or know them fully. We see them as ourselves. We see ourselves in the khandhas. Happiness and suffering we see as ourselves. We see ourselves in happiness and suffering. We can't separate ourselves from them. When we can't separate them, it means we can't see Dhamma. We can't see nature. Happiness, unhappiness, pleasure and sadness, none of them is us, but we take them to be so. These things come into contact with us, and we see a lump of atta or self. Wherever there is self, there you will find happiness, unhappiness, and everything else. So the Buddha said, to destroy this lump of self, that is to destroy Sakkaya Ditthi. When atta, self, is destroyed, anatta, non-self, naturally arises. We take nature to be us and ourselves to be nature, so we don't know nature truly. If it's good, we laugh with it. If it's bad, we cry over it. But nature is simply sankharas. As we say in the chanting, Tesam Vupasamo Sukho, meaning pacifying the sankharas is real happiness. How do we pacify them? We simply remove clinging and see them as they really are. So there is truth in this world. Trees, mountains, and vines all live according to their own truth. They are born and die following their nature. It's just we people who aren't true. We see it and make a fuss over it. but nature is impassive. It just is as it is. We laugh, we cry, we kill, but nature remains in truth. It is truth. No matter how happy or sad we are, this body just follows its own nature. It's born, it grows up and ages, changing and getting older all the time. It follows nature in this way. Whoever takes the body to be himself and carries it around with him will suffer. So Anakonda realized this. Whatever is born as just everything, be it material or immaterial. His view of the world changed. He saw the truth. Having got up from his sitting place, he took that truth with him. The activity of birth and death continued, but he simply looked on. Happiness and unhappiness were arising and passing away, but he merely noted them. His mind was constant. He no longer fell into the woeful states. He didn't get overpleased or unduly upset about these things. His mind was firmly established in the activity of contemplation. There, Anakonda had received the eye of Dhamma. He saw nature, which we call sankharas, according to truth. Wisdom is that which knows the truth of sankharas. This is the mind which knows and sees Dhamma, which has surrendered. Until we have seen the Dhamma, we must have patience and restraint. We must endure and we must renounce. We must cultivate diligence and endurance. Why must we cultivate diligence? Because we're lazy. Why must we develop endurance? Because we don't endure. That's the way it is. But when we are already established in our practice, have finished with laziness, then we don't need to use diligence. If we already know the truth of all mental states, if we don't get happy or unhappy over them, we don't need to exercise endurance, because the mind is already Dhamma. The one who knows has seen the Dhamma. He is the Dhamma. When the mind is Dhamma, it stops. It has attained peace. There's no longer a need to do anything special, because the mind is Dhamma already. The outside is Dhamma, the inside is Dhamma. The one who knows is Dhamma, the state is Dhamma, and that which knows the state is Dhamma. It is one, it is free. This nature is not born, it does not age nor sicken. This nature does not die. This nature is neither happy nor sad, neither big or small, heavy nor light, neither short nor long, black nor white. There's nothing you can compare it to, no convention can reach it. This is why we say nirvana has no color. All colors are merely conventions. The state which is beyond the world, no worldly convention can follow it. So the Dhamma is that which is beyond the world. It is that which each person should see for himself. It is beyond language. You can't put it into words. You can only talk about ways and means of realizing it. The person who has seen it for himself has finished his work. Page 67. Convention and Liberation. The things of this world are merely conventions of our own making. Having established them, we get lost in them and refuse to let go, giving rise to clinging to our own personal views and opinions. This clinging never ends. It is samsara, following endlessly on. It has no completion. Now, if we know conventional reality, then we'll know liberation. If we clearly know liberation, then we'll know convention. This is to know the Dhamma. Here there's completion. Take people for instance. In reality, people don't have any names. We are simply born naked into the world. If we have names, they arise only through convention. I've contemplated this and seen that if you don't know the truth of this convention, it can be really harmful. It's simply something we use for convenience. Without it, we couldn't communicate. There would be nothing to say, no language. I've seen the Westerners when they sit in meditation together in the West. When they get up after sitting, men and women together, sometimes they go and touch each other on the head. When I saw this, I thought, if we cling to convention, it gives rise to defilements right there. If we can let go of convention, give up our opinions, we are at peace. Side note, the head is regarded as sacred in Thailand, and to touch a person's head is considered an insult. Also, according to tradition, men and women do not touch each other in public. On the other hand, sitting in meditation is regarded as a holy activity. Perhaps here the Venerable Ajahn was using an example of Western behavior which would particularly shock his Thai audience. Like the generals back to the main text. Like the generals and colonels, men of rank and position who come to see me. When they come, they say, "Oh, please touch my head." If they ask like this, there's nothing wrong with it. They're glad to have their heads touched. But if you tapped their heads in the middle of the street, it'd be a different story. This is because of clinging. So I feel that letting go is really the way to peace. Touching a head is against our customs, but in reality it is nothing. When they agree to having it touched, there's nothing wrong with it, just like touching a cabbage or a potato. Accepting, giving up, letting go. This is the way of lightness. Wherever you're clinging, there's becoming and birth right there. There's danger right there. The Buddha taught about convention, and he taught to undo convention in the right way, and so reach liberation. This is freedom, not to cling to conventions. All things in this world have a conventional reality. Having established them, we should not be fooled by them, because getting lost in them really leads to suffering. This point concerning rules and conventions is of utmost importance. One who can get beyond them is beyond suffering. However, they are a characteristic of our world. Take Mr. Buma, for instance. He used to be just one of the crowd, but now he's been appointed the district commissioner. It's just a convention, but it's a convention we should respect. It's part of the world of people. If you think, before we were friends, we used to work at the tailor's together, and then you go and pat him on the head in public, he'll get angry. It's not right, he'll resent it. So we should follow the conventions in order to avoid giving rise to resentment. It's useful to understand convention. Living in the world is just about this. Know the right time and place. Know the person. Why is it wrong to go against conventions? It's wrong because of people. You should be clever, knowing both convention and liberation. Know the right time for each. If we know how to use rules and conventions comfortably, then we are skilled. But if we try to behave according to the higher level of reality in the wrong situation, this is wrong. Where is it wrong? It's wrong with people's defilements, nothing else. People all have defilements. In one situation we behave one way. In another situation we must behave in another way. We should know the ins and outs because we live within conventions. Problems occur because people cling to them. If we suppose something to be, then it is. It's there because we suppose it to be there. But if you look closely in the absolute sense, these things don't really exist. As I have often said, before we were laymen and now we are monks. We lived within the convention of layman and now we live within the convention of monk. We are monks by convention, not monks through liberation. In the beginning we established conventions like this, but if a person merely ordains, this doesn't mean he overcomes defilements. If we take a handful of sand and agree to call it salt, does this make it salt? It is salt, but only in name, not in reality. You couldn't use it to cook with. Its only use is within the realm of that agreement, because there's really no salt there, only sand. It becomes salt only through our supposing it to be so. This word liberation is itself just a convention, but it refers to that beyond conventions. Having achieved freedom, having reached liberation, we still have to use convention in order to refer to it as liberation. If we didn't have convention, we couldn't communicate, so it does have its use. For example, all people have differing names, but they are all the same people. They're all people, just the same. If we didn't have names to differentiate between them, and we wanted to call out to somebody standing in a crowd saying, "Hey, person, person," that would be useless. You couldn't say who would answer because they're all person. But if you called, "Hey, John," then John would come. The others wouldn't answer. Names fulfill just this need. Through them we can communicate. They provide the basis for social behavior. So you should know both convention and liberation. Conventions have a use, but in reality, there really isn't anything there. Even people are non-existent. They are merely groups of elements born of causal conditions, growing dependent on conditions, existing for a while, then disappearing in the natural way. No one can oppose or control it. But without conventions, we would have nothing to say. We'd have no names, no practice, no work. Rules and conventions are established to give us a language, to make things convenient, and that's all. Take money, for example. In olden times, there weren't any coins or notes. They had no value. People used materials and goods to barter as their money, but they were difficult to keep, so they changed, making notes and coins into money. Perhaps in the future we'll have a new king decree that we don't have to use paper money. We should use wax, melting it down and pressing it into lumps. We say this is money and use it throughout the country. Let alone wax, it may even happen that they decide to make chicken dung the local currency. All the other things can't be money, just chicken dung. Then people would fight and kill each other over chicken dung. This is the way it is. You could use many examples to illustrate convention. What we use for money is simply a convention that we have set up. It has its use within that convention. Having decreed it to be money, it becomes money. But in reality, what is money? Nobody can say. When there is a popular agreement about something, then a convention comes about to fulfill the need. The world is just this. This is convention, but to get ordinary people to understand liberation is really difficult. Our money, our house, our family, our children and relatives are simply conventions that we have invented. But really, seen in the light of Dhamma, they don't belong to us. Maybe if we hear this, we don't feel so good, but reality is like that. These things have value only through the established conventions. If we establish that it doesn't have value, then it doesn't have value. If we establish that it has value, then it has value. This is the way it is. We bring convention into the world to fulfill a need. Even this body is not really ours. We just suppose it to be so. It's truly just a supposition. If you try to find a real substantial self within it, you can't. They are merely elements which are born, continue for a while, and then die. Everything is like this. There's no real true substance to it, but it's proper that we use it. It's like a cup. At some time that cup must break, but while it's there you should use it and look after it well. It's a tool for your use. If it breaks, there's trouble. So even though it must break, you should try your utmost to preserve it. And so we have the four supports, which the Buddha taught again and again to contemplate. They are the supports on which a monk depends to continue his practice. As long as you live, you must depend on them. But you should understand them. Don't cling to them, giving rise to craving in your mind. Convention and liberation are related like this continually. Even though we use convention, don't place our trust in it as being the truth. If you cling to it, suffering will arise. The case of right and wrong is a good example. Some people see wrong as being right and right as being wrong. But in the end, who really knows what is right and what is wrong? We don't know. Different people establish different conventions about what's right and what's wrong. But the Buddha took suffering as his guideline. If you want to argue about it, there's no end to it. One says right, another says wrong. One says wrong, another says right. In truth, we don't really know right and wrong at all. But at a useful, practical level, we can say that right is not to harm oneself and not to harm others. This way fulfills a use. So, after all, both rules and conventions and liberation are simply Dhammas. One is superior to the other, but they go hand in hand. There's no way that we can guarantee that anything is definitely like this or like that. So the Buddha said to just leave it be. Leave it be as uncertain. However much you like it or dislike it, you should understand it as uncertain. Regardless of time and place, the whole practice of Dhamma comes to completion at the place where there is nothing. It's the place of surrender, of emptiness, of laying down the burden. This is the finish. It's not like the person who says, "Why is the flag fluttering in the wind?" I say it's because of the wind. Another person says it's because of the flag. Another retorts that it's because of the wind. There's no end to this. The same as the old riddle. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? There's no way to reach a conclusion. This is just nature. All these things we say are merely conventions. We establish them ourselves. If we know these things with wisdom, then you know impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. This is the outlook which leads to enlightenment. You know, training and teaching people with varying levels of understanding is really difficult. Some people have certain ideas. You tell them something and they don't believe you. You tell them the truth and they say it's not true. I'm right, you're wrong. There's no end to this. If you don't let go, there will be suffering. I've told you before about the 4 men who go into the forest. They hear a chicken crowing, "Kakada, kakada." One of them wonders, "Is that a rooster or a hen?" 3 of them say together, "It's a hen." But the other doesn't agree. He insists it's a rooster. "How could a hen crow like that?" he asks. They retort, "Well, it has a mouth, hasn't it?" They argue and argue until the tears fall, really getting upset over it, but in the end, they're all wrong. Whether you say a hen or a rooster, they're only names. We establish these conventions, saying a rooster is like this, a hen is like that, a rooster cries like this, a hen cries like that. This is how we get stuck in the world. Remember this. Actually, if you just say that really there's no hen and no rooster, then that's the end of it. In the field of conventional reality, one side is right and the other is wrong. The other side is wrong. But there will never be complete agreement. Arguing till the tears fall has no use. The Buddha taught not to cling. How do we practice non-clinging? We practice simply to give up clinging, but this non-clinging is very difficult to understand. It takes keen wisdom to investigate and penetrate this, to really achieve non-clinging. When you think about it, whether people are happy or sad, content or discontent, doesn't depend on their having little or having much. It depends on wisdom. All distress can be transcended only through wisdom, through seeing the truth of things.